Hey, how's it everybody out there in YouTube land? My name's Chard. Welcome to this episode of 1 Foot of Books. A foot of books. This is a foot of books. 1 foot. Which in the parlance of the rest of the world, 30 centimeters roundabout, give or take. So, the format of the show, I just grab a foot of books from my collection behind and around me, and I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about them, where I got them from, if I've read them, or is this all just a massive TBR pile for people who are new to the acronyms, to be read. Alright, let's start on this side. The Small Assassin, Ray Bradbury. This is a relatively new copy. Well, not relatively. It's not a classic one. This one's from 1976. And it's in very good condition. I have read a few stories in this. It's a collection of short stories, including The Small Assassin, which is a big one for Bradbury fans. I've read a bit of Bradbury here and there. The Golden Apples one collection or something like that. I think I've read a few of this in this, but it's been a long time. Ray Bradbury, if you don't know, one of the giants of sci-fi, and left behind a quite a big volume of work. A lot of short stories. Like any good, great sci-fi writer that came out of that time, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, he wrote a ton of short stories and various collections like this one. The Small Assassin. I like that cover. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Small Assassin. Bit of Hemingway. For Whom the Bell Tolls. I don't know. This is it's a hardcover edition from, let me see if it's got a date in here. 1963. British edition. Yeah, the dust jacket's pretty cool. Very of the time. Forgive me if you can hear the neighbour cutting metal at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Hemingway. A giant of modern American English literature. I got this far in For Whom the Bell Tolls. Apparently one of his best ever books. I couldn't get into it at the time. Just didn't grab me. Took a long time to get anywhere. I was much more of a fan of A Fair Lot of Arms. The Snows of Kilimanjaro, I think, is one of the best short stories ever written. That was amazing. But yeah, this one just didn't grab me. I'll get into it again another time. I'm sure my Hemingway interest will spark again at some point. And I endeavour to finish this book at some stage. I do like Hemingway. Colin Wilson, The Strength to Dream. Pretty cool edition. It's a bit dirty. It's a little bit, I don't know if that's mold or just age. 1982 edition. First came out in 1962. Colin Wilson, I don't know if you know Colin Wilson. He was a very prolific writer. He gained notoriety / fame in the 1950s with a book called The Outsider, which, I don't know if he was the first to do it, but it popularized a type of book that came out. There was just a bunch, I don't mean to downplay it or anything, but it's like a bunch of short essays around different themes that kind of about the outsider in literature and popular culture. Cool book. I'd recommend it. It's a great entryway into the works of Colin Wilson. He went on to release a bunch of books in that kind of same style, just like extended essays on different themes within a theme. This one is about imagination and how it works. So he looks critically at the images of the world portrayed in the works of such authors as H.P. Lovecraft, John Paul Sartre, I don't even know how to say that, Tolkien, D.H. Lawrence, Huxley, Wells, Samuel Beckett. Just goes through it and yeah, writes stuff about certain works. And I like his books. I like his books like that. He wrote a ton of different books. Go and check him out. He passed away a few years ago now. Maybe 2009, 2010. I could be wrong. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Colin Wilson. I liked what he did. The Idler's Companion hardcover edition. The Idler was a magazine back in the 1700s, published by Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson. This was first published in 1996, and it was edited by Tom Hodgkinson and Matthew Diabitua. The Idler was resurrected by Tom Hodgkinson back in the early 2000s. I think it's still going today. I'm not sure. Really cool magazine. You can order it from online from the website. Get a subscription. I had a subscription for a while. It was a bit expensive, but at the time I was a bit poor, but I really liked it, and I got a few editions of it. And I got this as well, The Idler's Companion, which is, so The Idler kind of focuses on kind of putting in less effort into the world, being a little bit lazy, a little bit idle, like not worrying too much about output, and just kind of going with the flow. This is full of little examples of idleness in literature. So essays from people like Bertrand Russell, G.K. Chesterton, Oscar Wilde, Robert Louis Stevenson, Omar, so a bit from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, Will Self, Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare, maybe, Thoreau. There's a really cool poem in here I want to read to you, and it's given me a lot of kind of respite on a stressed day. It's Wages. It's called Wages. It's from a collection called Pansies by D.H. Lawrence. The wages of work is cash. The wages of cash is want more cash. The wages of want more cash is vicious competition. The wages of vicious competition is the world we live in. The work, cash, want circle is the viciousest circle that ever turned men into fiends. Earning a wage is a prison occupation, and a wage earner is a sort of jailbird. Earning a salary is a prison overseer's job, a jailer instead of a jailbird. Living on our income is strolling grandly outside the prison in terror lest you have to go in. And since the work prison covers almost every scrap of the living earth, you stroll up and down on a narrow beat, about the same as a prisoner taking his exercise. This is called universal freedom. So the idler movement kind of battled against the tyranny of the clock, as an anarchist writer would put it. Is that Woodcock? Something like that. Yeah, and just modern society is this, vicious race up a ladder or down into a pit, no matter what way you look at it. And just kind of going against that and just being like, no, chill, man. Got an awesome. This is a great little book. If you ever see a copy, get it. It's just kind of calms you down. It's not self-help. It's just, it helps you see things a little less seriously than they really are. Bob Woodward Wired, the rather infamous biography of John Belushi, disavowed by a lot of his friends and people who came up with him. Made into a rather infamous movie in 1989 that no one saw, and a lot of people disavowed. I've never seen the movie, but I have read this book. Worthwhile a book if you're interested in John Belushi stuff. I liked it. I read it. It was quite insightful into the time and the era, the place where John Belushi came up, found his fame, got lost in it, and just never made it out. Yeah, it's quite sad. He was an interesting character. I would have liked to have seen what else he was capable of. You kind of touched on it a little bit in his rather limited output in the 70s and early 80s. But he could have been a powerhouse, man. Like, it just could have been like Jim Carrey styles. Like, he could have done drama as well as comedy and slapstick and stuff like that. I think he, you know, he was an interesting dude. Not the nicest of guys, like, all the time, but, you know, well-liked, respected. But just got lost, man. But yeah, there's a lot of controversy around this book. A lot of people didn't like it. Said it was just like they painted him as a drug fiend and this kind of stuff. But yeah, read it, make up your own mind. The Teachings of Don Juan Carlos Castaneda. The Yucky Way of Knowledge. This is the first book in the series that Castaneda wrote. I think there was about 12 in the series. This is a 1990 edition. Originally came out in 1968. Castaneda was a bit of a mysterious figure. Yeah, do some reading about Castaneda. He was an anthropology student. Kind of came from mysterious backgrounds, just kind of, you know, and he came and he wrote these books and he reckons they were true. Turns out they weren't, but were they? I don't know. Another writer kind of did the same thing, was a British guy, Lapsang Rama or Rapsang Lama. This British guy who wrote a bunch of books about going and hanging out with lamas in Tibet. I think it was in the 50s and 60s. And again, he kind of inspired a movement, but he never actually partook in what he was writing about. It was, yeah, I don't know, it was weird. But these are really cool. Like, I've read the first two. I haven't read the other ones. I've got a friend who's got all of them. He read them all. He's like, I love them. I've read the first two. They're pretty cool. If you haven't read Teachings of Don Juan, at least, good book. Yeah, not many other books like it. Yeah, but yeah, I like the kind of mythos that has come up around it too. It's quite cool. Cormac McCarthy, Blood Meridian. I got this for $2 at the Springwood Salvos. I first read Blood Meridian. I read The Road, and I wanted to read this because, like a lot of people, I was alerted to Cormac McCarthy through the popularity of The Road when it came out, and then the subsequent movie. I'd heard of All the Pretty Horses when it first came out in 2000, the movie, but I just didn't interest me. I still haven't seen the movie. I've read the book. I read a few of his books now. Blood Meridian, I first got this out of the Marrickville Library when I was living there, and read it in like a few days. Saw this in the Salvos. I was like, gotta have a copy. I want to read it again. It's been a few years. I read it again. And I read it again. I've read it about 3 times now. One of the most violent but amazing, disturbing westerns ever. I love it. It's an awesome book. It's quite off-putting, would be off-putting to a lot of people. It's very violent, very visceral, but also kind of poetic. And the judge, the boy, the kid, as his name is in the book. I'll read it again. I feel like reading it again now. It's been about a year since I read it. Yeah, love this book, man. If you're a fan of westerns, movies, video games like Red Dead, this will blow your socks off, man. They've tried to make it into a movie a lot of times over the years. I think it first came out in the early 80s. 1985. But a movie wouldn't do it justice. It has to be read to be experienced. You have to read it in Cormac McCarthy's style. If you don't know his writing style, he gets rid of a lot of punctuation, writes in big long sentences, doesn't use speech marks, just kind of flows. And if you get into that flow, it's a beautiful thing. And even the stuff he wrote when it's like horrifically violent, you get into those flows and it's like, wow. Awesome book, amazing book. I would recommend that to anyone who likes to read, but be careful because it is very violent. And but McCarthy said I'm only interested in talking about the big themes, life and death, and this has got both in spades, probably death more. Love that book. John Fowles, The Magus. Fowles wrote, he got kind of famous for The French Lieutenant's Woman, which came out as a movie in the 70s with Meryl Streep. He also wrote a really good serial killer book called The Collector in the early 60s, but I haven't read that. I don't see it around. I got this at the Vinnie's in Kingsgrove in Sydney when I was living not far, about a half an hour walk away. Used to walk down there and have a look, and I was just like, oh, Fowles, I've heard of him. This looks like a cool book. It sounds really cool. On a remote Greek island, Nicholas Urfe finds himself embroiled in the deceptions of a master trickster. As reality and illusion intertwine, Urfe is caught up in the darkest of psychological games. Cool book. They made it into a movie back in the late 60s. I haven't seen it. Apparently, it's one of the worst movies of all time. But after reading this, I'd be kind of keen to see it. I liked it. This is a really cool book. Yeah, just kind of reserved English teacher. Moves to Greece to get away from, like, you know, the life going nowhere in London. And, yeah, he's got no family. And he's just like, gotta get out. So he applies for this post teaching English at a Greek school on an island. He goes out there and meets the Magus, who, yeah, kind of like Gurdjieff, G.I. Gurdjieff and other kind of mystics from back in the sands of time. Just kind of challenges everything that he thinks and believes and plays these jokes on him and just messes with his head and his perceptions. And a really cool book. I really liked it. It got a bit tough halfway through, but by the end, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's got a great line in it where the Magus asks Nicholas, are you the water or the wave? And that stuck with me. Yeah, really cool book. Yeah, this is it's a Penguin vintage, something like that, or a Vintage Classics. I think it first came out in the early or mid-60s, very much of its time, 1966. Just kind of played into a bit of the kind of hippie stuff going on at the time, but also delved back into World War II and Nazism. And yeah, good book. Good book, recommend it. Another Cormac McCarthy. I found this box of books across the road where I found also Christopher Hitchens' book of essays. The Border Trilogy, which contains All the Pretty Horses, The Crossing, and Cities of the Plain. All three are really good books. All the Pretty Horses has really kind of cool doomed love aspect to it. John Cole and Billy Parham meet up, and they are the two main characters from the series, and they meet up and go down to Mexico to become kind of ranch hands and horse breakers. And John Cole falls in love with the ranch owner's daughter, and yeah, doesn't work out. Cormac McCarthy, who would have thunk it? The third book, Cities of the Plain, kind of ties everything up between the two characters, John Cole and Billy Parham, as the kind of the West, that they had grown up and come of age and is kind of giving way to kind of, I think it ends in the 30s, so the Depression, World War II is coming, so the world's like really changing. And but I think the best of the series is just me. The best of the series with me is The Crossing, the middle episode, which concerns Billy Parham when he was 16, and him and his dad capture a she-wolf roaming their kind of border country ranch on the border of Mexico. And he kind of takes it upon himself to take this captured wolf back to the mountains of Mexico, back to its home, to return it to where it's from. And I think he crosses the border and back 3 times. He goes and takes the wolf back to various levels of success. He goes with his brother, and then he goes back looking for his brother. And to me, that was an amazing book. It's just, it's almost mythological, Greek tragedy, but set in the desert wastes and mountains of Mexico and the Texas borderlands. And yeah, Billy just goes through all sorts of stuff. And man, The Crossing, they work as standalone books. The Crossing, if you ever see a copy of that, or if you've got a copy you haven't read it, or if you find this, the Border Trilogy, read it. The Crossing just blew my mind. That, which less so than Blood Meridian, because Blood Meridian is its own kind of beast, but The Crossing was amazing. It was beautiful and sad and a little bit life-affirming, but just, yeah, amazing book, The Crossing. Border Trilogy was all worth it. The Murder of the Innocents. Child Killers and Their Victims. I got this from the Anarchist Bookshop, Jura, in Sydney one time, years and years and years ago. I never read it, but I kind of had to flip through today, because I was like, all right, let's see what this book's about. And it's written from the Australian perspective, and it's got a breakdown of tons of child murders and what happened to the people who committed them, and dating back to like the 20s, 30s, and through to the 80s. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. This is, because, you know, I think on serial killers and you know, the extremes of the human condition and human behavior, and I was like, well, this is quite an in-depth book. Not for the faint of heart. If you don't want to read about child killings, probably not the best book to read. It's just, but it's yeah, I was quite taken aback by this kind of book. It's not from 1985. Yeah, I'll have to dip into this again. I quite liked it. I'm quite surprised. The Tides of War, Stephen Pressfield. Of course, Stephen Pressfield wrote a book called The War of Art, which is about, what, 110 pages long. Probably one of the best books you'll ever read about the creative process, being a creative. But he also wrote other stuff. He wrote the movie and the book, The Legend of Bag of Ants, that Will Smith, Matt Damon one that kind of made a splash back in the late 90s. But Pressfield's got not a checkered history, a long history trying to make it as a writer, and he kind of made it back in the 90s. And he wrote, he's a big military historian, and he wrote a bunch of books about Alexander the Great, the Peloponnesian War, like this one, The Tides of War, and that apparently they used in like military schools, because he's so on point about like just like the history aspect of militarism and stuff like that. I haven't read this book. I found a stack of his books at a secondhand furniture / junk shop in Dulwich Hill, and I got him. I haven't read him yet. I've read The War of Art, but I haven't read his historical fiction yet. I'm keen to. I hear it's good. This is the novel of Alcibiades. Am I saying that right? Greek friends, and the Peloponnesian War. Stephen Pressfield, best-selling author of Gates of Fire. Yeah, he wrote about the 300 Spartans, of course. Oh, I need some coffee. How's the coffee where you are? Also from that furniture / junk shop is this one, Gloria Yehoda, The Trail of Tears, the American Indian Removals, 1813 to 1855. I do like the cover. It's a little bit faded there. I kind of like that. Like other books were sitting on top of it for years, and then it just kind of goes back into full color from there. Quite like that aspect of it. Gloria Yehoda was a writer who wrote a lot about the history of Florida, it turns out. And this book is a first edition, first British edition, 1976. It's still in really good condition. I've had a bit of a flip through it. It looks like a really exhaustive history of the Trail of Tears. If you haven't heard about the Trail of Tears, go and read up about it. It's horrible, shocking, disgusting, stain on the soul of humanity kind of thing. And it happened. And it needs to be acknowledged and read about more and talked about more. And yeah, amazing that it happened, and really sad. But this is like, I had a bit of a flip through this morning. Looks really cool. Lots of maps, lots of pictures, lots of different points of view from the Indian perspective. Lots of quotes. Or Native American, I should say. Sorry. Yeah. It's yeah. I'm keen to get into this more. I do love history, reading about history. Especially the really dark parts, because there's a lot, and humans are not the nicest of people. And yeah, I'm keen to get into this more. Anyway, that's foot of books. 1 foot of books today. There's 1 foot. If you've got any questions or you want to talk about any of the books I talked about today, hit me up in the comments below. I'll say hi. Get a bit of a chat going. That'd be cool. Yeah, have a good day, everyone. Have a good coffee. Call your parents, whatever you need to do.